Hello friends, welcome to my video. Today I am going to talk about the discard placeholder variable that was introduced in C# 7.0. We'll see what the discard placeholder variable is and when and how to use it in a program. So before we get started, just a quick reminder to subscribe my channel, hit the red button and don't forget to click on the little bell icon. That way you will be notified every time I upload a new video. Okay, without any further delay, let's get started. Discard placeholder variable in C# 7.0 and above. What is discard placeholder variables? Discards are placeholder variables that are intentionally unused in an application code. It is introduced in C# 7.0 and thus it is available in C# 7.0 and above versions. It is denoted by an underscore. Okay, let's try to understand with the help of examples shown over here. So here I have given two examples, example number 1 and example number 2. In example number 1, where we are not going to use discard placeholder variables, and second, where we will be using discard placeholder variable. In first example, there is a static method named isDateValid that accepts one string parameter date text and returns the boolean value. In this method, I have declared and assigned boolean variable isValid as false. In next statement, I have declared datetime variable datetime. It is mandatory to declare variable for out parameter before C# 7.0, even though we are not concerned what it returns. Anyway, then in next statement, I call try parse exact method of datetime class and pass necessary parameters like date text. And then the format against date text is going to be validated. Then next parameter as culture info dot invariant culture date time styles dot none, and at last I mentioned out parameter date time for which I declared variable earlier over here, right? So this try parse exact method validates the date text and returns either true or false value, and that I stored into the isValid variable which is of the boolean type. And finally, return the isValid so that the calling method gets the output whether the supplied date is valid or not. So if you notice in these examples, even though we are getting data in out parameter, we are not using at all. So why to declare and store the value if you are not bothered about what it returns, right? So that's where discard placeholder variables comes into the picture, where we do not actually declare the variable and use it. Okay, let's try to understand from the example shown over here. In these examples, we are using same static method isDateValid with little modification. What little modification is? Here we are not declaring datetime variable, and while calling the try parse exact method, we are not passing this out parameter, out datetime. Here instead of that, I am just using discard placeholder variable, and that's what I have written out underscore over here, right? This function will still work as the previous one, but this time we are not allocating memory for datetime, and thus it improves the performance and code is much cleaner and readable. Use cases of discards. So here we are going to see at what scenarios we can utilize discard in C#. So there are main four areas where we can use discard placeholder variable. Number 1, calls to method with out parameters. Number 2, tuple and object deconstruction. Number 3, a standalone discard. Number 4, pattern matching with switch. Okay, in call to methods without parameters, I am sure most of the developers must have come across scenario like checking whether the given date in a string format is a valid date or not by using try parse or try parse exact method. So these methods expect the out parameter to produce the datetime result along with the boolean result. So we must declare datetime variable for out parameter even though we are not going to use it. So this is the ideal situation where discard placeholder variable fits correctly. So if you see the examples over here, boolean isValid is equal to false, and then I'm calling this try parse exact method of the datetime class. So here I have given the all the parameters that is required for this try parse exact method. So first parameter is the date text. So date text is nothing but that holds the data string. Okay, and this is the format against we are going to verify culture info dot invariant culture date time styles dot not, and here if you see out and I have mentioned underscore. So basically here I have used the discard placeholder variable because we are not going to use the result that we are going to get it under this variable. So we do not require it, so we are just going to ignore it. So that's what we have used discard placeholder variables over here. This is the number 2, tuple and object deconstruction. So tuple and object deconstruction are also the eligible scenario where we can opt discard placeholder variable. For tuples, we use discard to use some tuple elements but ignore others. For examples, if you see here, there is a get imply method, right? That accepts no parameter, but it is returning tuple, right? So in tuple element, which is of the int data type, a string data type, and the third parameter is also the string data type. And if you see here, I have defined this tuple over here where the value is 1 Ravi India, and then I'm keeping into this imply, which is nothing but the tuple, right? So and then I'm returning this imply. Here I am just interesting about the id variable. That's what I have written, where id and the other variables name and country, we do not require it. I just want to ignore it. So that's what I have used this underscore underscore, which is nothing but the discard placeholder variables. So that's how we are going to use discard placeholder variables in tuples. Third scenario is a standalone discards, where we opt discard to indicate any variable that we choose to ignore. So here I have written underscore is equal to message double question mark throw new argument null exception param name and the message. So anyway, if message is null, then it is just going to throw the error, right? But it requires some variable needs to be placed over here, but we are not going to use it anywhere, right? Because any exception will throw, it will go to the catch block if we have this try and catch block. Right now it's not there, then it will be throwing that exception. So even though we are not going to use whatever the variable that we are defining over here, and that's what we have used discard placeholder variable over here, which is nothing but the underscore over here. So that is the third use case where we can opt discard. Okay. The fourth scenario is the pattern matching with switch, where every expression including null always matches the discard pattern. Let's try to understand with the help of example shown over here. Here object obj is equal to 5, and here what I have written, the switch statement. Switch obj, and if you see case int underscore, and then if it is the int, then it is just going to print this statement console.writeline int object. If it is not an int, then it will come to the default and it will be printing this unknown type into the console window. Okay, let's switch to the Visual Studio and see all these things in action. So here we are on Visual Studio. Here we are going to see the demo of the discard placeholder variable in C# 7.0 and above. And we will be covering all four scenarios, like calls to method without parameters, discard with tuple, discard with object destruction, a standalone discard, and pattern matching with switch. So we will be covering all these scenarios in single program itself. Okay, so for that, what I have done, I have created one console application and I have gave the name discards in C# 7. There is a class program.cs. So there in this namespace, we have two class, program class and the imply class. Imply class, we have three auto implemented properties, name, city, and country. And there is a parameterized constructor, imply a string name, a string city, and a string country. Whatever the input that we are receiving in a constructor, we are binding to this auto implemented property. So basically what we are doing, we are assigning all these parameters values to these properties. So there is a deconstruct method where we have three parameters, out a string name, out a string city, and out a string country. So name, city, and country, we are assigning these values from the properties over here. Okay. Now come to the class program. In class program, we have four methods: is date valid method, get imply method, my method, and another one is the main method. And this main method, which is an entry point of this program, right? Okay. So date valid method, basically this is a static method that accepts a string parameters, that is the date text. So in this method we have this boolean variable is valued and I have assigned false values to it, okay, at the initial point of the time. Then what I'm doing, I'm just going to call this try parse exact method of the datetime class, and here we are going to pass five parameters: data text, and this is the mmddyy, that is the format, and then culture info.invariant culture, data time style.none. So these two are coming from the system.globalization. Okay, now there is a out parameter, and here I have mentioned the discard placeholder variable. Basically this try parse exact method expects out parameter. That's what we are given here, discard placeholder variable, because we are not going to use it. If you see this method, what we are going to use is valid, that is coming as a boolean value as a part of this try parse exact. So this try parse exact returns two things. One is the out parameter and one is the final result. Okay, that is going to get stored into this is valid variable. And then here we are returning is valid variable as a boolean value. So whoever calling this method will be getting that boolean value as a output. Okay, so this is the one of the method. The second method is get imply. So get imply method basically returning as a tuple. So basically in this get imply method, we have defined this tuple and it has three elements. One, Ravi and India. One is nothing but the int data type. Ravi is a string data type. India is also from the string data type. Okay. So here is the get imply. And here what I have done, I have given this tuple with the named variable. So that's what I have written int id, a string name and a string country, and then imply is equal to 1 Ravi India. So I have given this equal to the name so that it will be based on that variable itself. Okay, and then what I'm doing, I'm just returning as an imply. If you don't know about the tuples and all, I have already created this video earlier, so you can go and visit those things. Anyway, I will be giving that link in the description section of this video. Now there is a method, there is a my method, which is nothing but the static method, and its return type is the void. Here we are receiving as a parameter a string, and here what I'm going to do, I'm just going to check whether this message is null or not. If it is null, then it needs to raise null exception error. Okay, argument null exception error, and that's what I have written this one. MSG double question mark throw new argument null exception param name of message cannot be null. And if you notice, this statement is just going to return if this message is null. So even though whatever I'm putting variable over there, it is not going to get used, right? So that's what I have given here, discard placeholder variable, and that's what I have mentioned underscore over here, right? And then I'm just printing this message in the next statement. If it is not null, then it is just going to print this message into this console window. Okay, and if there is any exception, it will be exception will be written into this console window. That's it. Now come to the main method. Okay, so here what I have done, I have just given that statement over here that I'm going to give the demo of the discard placeholder variable in C# 7.0 and above. So the first scenario, what was that? Calls to method with out parameter. In the next statement, what I have done, I have created one date text of the string type, and here I have given this date 09/25/2022, right? And then I'm going to call this is date valid method, and I'm passing this text date text over in this method is date valid. So basically this method will get called, and then it will return either true or false value based on this validation. Okay, so if you so basically that is the way where we are going to use discard, and this is the out parameter. If you notice over here, I have already discussed here, I have used this discards placeholder variable. So basically we do not require, we are just ignoring that particular variable, we are not using at all. That's what I have used discard placeholder variable. That is the first examples I have shown over here, this one to here, right? So this is talks about the calls to method with out parameters. Okay, now coming to the scenario number 2, a discard with the tuples. Here what I'm going to do, here I'm just going to call this get imply method, and get imply method will return as a tuple, and this tuple I'm just interested for the id variable, and the other two variables city and the country I'm just going to discard it because we are not interested at all, right? So if you see here, this method, it is returning everything, id, name and country, but I'm interested only the id, and this name and country I'm not interested. So what I have done over here, I have just call this get imply, and the we are going to get this tuple, and here in tuple only the id element I am interested in. So that's what I have written, where id, the name and country I have just instead of given the proper variable, I just put underscore over here. So basically here I am using discard placeholder variable, so that we are not interested for the name and country, and that's what we have used. And in the next statement, whatever the id that we have got it as a part of the tuple destruction, we are going to get these things into this console window over here. Okay, in scenario number 2b, discard with the object destruction. So here what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create an instance of this imply class, and in a parameterized constructor I have passed three parameters, Ravi, Paris and France. Okay, so that constructor will get called, and it will assign these name, city and country value to the auto implemented property, that this property will get initialized whenever we are going to create imply class with the parameterized constructor. Okay, so once it is done, then what I'm going to do over here in the next statement over here, I am just going to deconstruct the imply object. So how we are going to do, we are just going to var name, and then city we do not require, we just require the country and name, and that's what city. If it is not required, then I have just given this discard placeholder variable over here. So this is the way I am going to deconstruct the imply object. So for having this statement like this, we need to have this deconstruct method over here into this imply class. In this deconstruct method, we are returning name, city, country as an out parameter, and that's what we are going to receive in this fashion. This name underscore and country here, city I'm not interested, that's what I have given this discard placeholder variables over here. And once this name and country is assigned, then we are going to use this variable into the next statement in console.writeLine statement. So this is a name, whatever the name it will come, it will just replace with this placeholder, and then from, and then country, right? So this statement is just going to get printed into this console window. Okay, now come to the scenario number 3, where the a standalone discard, we are going to see that. So here what I have done, I have just called this my method, and I'm pass input parameters as a high. So this method will get called, and here we are going to check whether this message that is received as an input parameters, whether it has null value or not. If it is a null value, then it will throw an exception, and then this statement is just going to get printed into the system. If MSG is not null, then this statement it will go and print it, and that's what I have just passed in my method high. So it is not null, so this statement high will get printed into this console window, right? And if you see here, I have used this discard placeholder variable, because whatever the exception is going to get thrown, doesn't care what variable we are putting it over here, because it is not going to use that, because we are not going to use that, right? So that's what I have used discard placeholder variable over here. Okay, so that's the third scenario where I have used a standalone discard operation. Okay, now coming to the scenario number 4, pattern matching with the switch statement. Here what I have done, I have created an object obj, and I have assigned 5 value to it, 5, which is nothing but the int data type, right? So obj object obj is equal to 5, and here I have written this switch statement. Okay, switch case. In switch case, I have just passed this object, and here what I have done, in case statement I have written a string underscore case int underscore default. So if it is of the int type, then this statement is just going to get printed, right? And here I have defined 5, which is nothing but the int, right? Which is the value of the int. So that's what this statement is just going to get printed. And if you notice, I have written this underscore over here, right? So that's the use of this pattern matching in this switch case statement with the help of discard, right? Okay, so you have seen all these statements what I have written as a part of the program. Let me execute this and see the output. Okay, so output got appear into this console window. Here if you see the first statement, demo discard placeholder variable in C# 7.0 and above got printed, and scenario 1 calls to method with out parameters. We call this method is date valid, and it is giving me return as a true, and that's what date is valid, true got printed. Scenario number 2, discard with the tuples. We have created tuple, and we are getting this tuple as a part of the return parameters to calling method, and from there I have just used this id variable, and that's what id variable I have printed over here. Id value is 1. Scenario number 2 be discard with the object destruction. So here what I have done, I have created an object imply, and then I have just deconstructed that, and I am interested only just for the name and the country. I'm not interested for the city. For the city place, I have used discard placeholder variables. That value, I am just ignoring that. I am just interested with the name and the country. And that's what name and country we have received it. And then I'm just going to print it these things into this console window. This is Ravi from France. Okay, coming to the scenario number 3, a standalone discard. So here what I have done, I have my method and I have passed the high as an input parameters to it. Inside that, I have checked whether this particular message is null or not. If it is null, then we are just throwing with the help of argument null exception, right? And this argument null exception and the null coalescing operator we have used, it is requiring that variable needs to be assigned over there, whatever it is going. Anyway, we are not going to use that, but we need to assign. That's where I have used discard placeholder variable. So anyway, I have passed this high value to 8 as an input parameters, which is not null. Then it just pass that particular line and then it just go to print this high statement with the help of the console.writeLine statement. Okay, scenario number 4, pattern matching with this switch. So in pattern matching, in the switch case statement, we have already seen that we have defined this object, right? Object is equal to 5. And I have used case statement where I have used a string underscore int underscore, and this 5 is nothing but int, right? So that's what this case statement will come to the picture and this line will get executed, and that's why this statement got printed over here, int object, right? So that's the use cases of the discard placeholder variable. Benefits of discard in C# 7.0 and above. Here we are going to talk about the benefits associated with discard placeholder variables. Number 1, reduces the memory allocation. What does it mean is, if we do not use discard placeholder variable, we need to declare the variable for out parameter, and that's what it gets allocated some memory. So with discard placeholder variable, we don't need to declare the variable for out parameter, and thus it saves some memory. Number 2, make our code clean. The variable that we are not using at all, then why to declare it? So with discard placeholder variable, we do not require declaration. That makes our code clean. Number 3, it also makes our code more readable and maintainable. Now that brings me to end of my session. To sum up, in this video we saw what discard placeholder variable is, and then we talked about its use cases and saw some of its examples for each scenario. And finally, we discussed about its benefits. That's all for this video, guys. If you like this video, hit the like button, share it with your friends and colleagues, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done already. Thanks for watching. See you next video.